The final thing is Estevao Willian gave this big interview to The Guardian. I really suggest go and read it because there's so much detail in here about his career. And the ridiculous thing is, and it's brought up in the piece very quickly in terms of how young he is. And this is something I've talked about a lot in the case of him, in the case of Kendrick Pires as well, is that, you know, my slight fear and apprehension of putting too much pressure on these players. I really do still think this with Estevao. I know people are very excited about what they're seeing. And I'm not saying don't be excited, don't be hopeful, don't think about what he could become at Chelsea. It's just marrying that potential with understanding he is going to make a major move to Chelsea and the pressure. And I just hope for his and Kendrick Pires' sake, when they do arrive at Stamford Bridge next summer, it's a more stable environment, because I think if it's not that you can't, like Cole Palmer, right, has overcome that. But especially when you're coming from a different culture, a different country, having to learn a new language, it will be a big challenge for these players, and understanding some grace for that. So let's jump into what he had to say. So he was the interesting thing was already, of course, playing for the Brazil national team, and it's interesting him saying that Alisson in goal, Alisson Becker, has got a bit angry because he keeps on hitting shots past him in training, so it sort of shows the level of his talent. But he also says that school is kind of the rest of his day when he's not playing football, and he says it's not easy. There are some very difficult subjects. Physics is the hardest to him. It's very difficult to remember the formulas, how to work it out. And apparently the move to London will be the fourth of his life so far. He was born in Franca in the countryside of Sao Paulo. He moved to Belo Horizonte at the age of 8 to play for Cruzeiro. From a poor background, he remembers the difficulties of that time and compares them to going to London. And he sort of talks about adapting to London, how he thinks it actually might be a bit easier, but it just shows you at a very young age he's had to adapt to different circumstances, which maybe makes him suited with a unique life, especially as a young footballer with this trajectory he's on already, you know, more suited than kind of other people, but it is something to factor in. But then he's asked, I think one of the more interesting answers, you know, he's talked about Cole Palmer, and he says that him and Cole had a conversation. He's obviously done the Cole Palmer celebration as well, and he says that, you know, Cole Palmer basically said to him, we'll do great things at Chelsea, which is good to see that he's having that connection already with his future Chelsea teammates. I know that Kendrick Pires went to Stamford Bridge last year, at least this year. It was during the winter last season. So they're trying to get these players integrated, which I think is a positive thing. But then he was asked about some of the big young stars that have failed at Chelsea before. The likes of Kevin De Bruyne, Mohamed Salah, Romelu Lukaku, or at least didn't work out at Chelsea, of course, had to make a career elsewhere. That doesn't worry me because each one is different. I don't know the context of what they were like, and I'm going to have to give my all effort every day. So in terms of Estevao, yes, he is coming in maybe with some benefit, the fact that him and Pires are coming in at the same time, in that they can kind of be good peers and it's not just all on one person's shoulders. I think that some of the hype of these young players does concern me, and the collateral damage maybe of putting so much pressure on them. My hope is, and you know, I think that it's the case as well with academy players. I want academy players to come into the first team and be surrounded by good first team professionals, experienced players who can lead them and can help them, and so the burden isn't on those young shoulders to be the stars of Chelsea. You know, obviously right now Cole Palmer is the star of Chelsea and he's still a relatively young player, so it's not that those players can't do that. I just hope that when Estevao arrives, Chelsea are in a good way. They're back in the Champions League. Maresca's settled as a first team head coach. The team looks more unified. The club all round at all levels looks more coherent on the men's side than it has over the past 12 to 18 months. And a player like him has a chance to fulfill that potential at Stamford Bridge, because listen, the stories, it's been talked about so many times over the years about how Chelsea nearly signed Neymar and what could have been if Chelsea signed Neymar, and kind of the dreams for a lot of people, especially South American Chelsea fans, who feel that this guy is one of the best talents they've developed. Even with Vinicius Jr., even with Endrick coming through in recent years, they truly believe this. We spoke to Jessica Frotta in April or May time about this. But I always, you know, I'd like to think it's going to be a positive atmosphere when these players arrive. So they do have the potential to, or the platform to reach that potential is kind of the right thing to say. So I think it's a good interview, and there's an excitement of what's to come and the idea of the succession plan and Chelsea going from strength to strength, and it not just all relying on Palmer for the long term and what comes after him. You know, if the worst was to happen and Palmer was to leave Chelsea, obviously it looks unlikely currently with the current trajectory, but you never know, and it's just generally the case. You should be looking to strengthen, to have people in reserve who can come up and be the succession plan in the long term for you in key positions, and hopefully Paez and Estevao will prove to be that. But definitely suggest go and listen and read that interview, because I think there's a lot of interesting insight about him as a young person, about his development and where he could be going in his career at Chelsea. But that is it for today's much longer news show. Let me know your thoughts on everything I discussed in the comments below, and I will see you again very soon. All the best.